For more on the elections, Abdullahi Boru Halakhe joins me from here in Washington. He's an Africa security and policy analyst. Abdullahi, thanks very much for your time. Now, this weekend's presidential election is one of the most consequential in the 23 years. Tell us more about why that is.
It is in the sense that Nigeria is probably one of the most significant country on the continent, right? Not just because of its sheer population size, but also because of its history. You know, here is a country that, you know, until very recently has had a fair share of turbulence in terms of government changes. And now, over the last few years, that is probably 10, 15, now 20 years, it has had an election. So I think having a free, fair and legitimate election that everybody sees as such would be huge, not just for entrenchment of Nigeria's democratic credentials, but also for others at a time when most of the discussions around good governance and election is that democracy is on retreat. This would be a massive step forward for Nigeria and the continent.
So you mentioned free and fair elections. Tell us a little bit more about the rampant reports of violence at polling stations, some of the logistical problems as well. What do people face when trying to cast their ballot today?
I think there are a few things, and some of them are issues that are outside even during the electoral calendar, right? So Nigeria has a serious graft problem, and so that becomes very, very serious when during elections I could go around and buy votes to ensure that I'll be able to get elected. I mean, you just need to look at the caliber of the candidates that are on show, not just at the national level, which gets a ton of attention, but also across the state, the 36 states in Nigeria. So that makes it very difficult in terms of curbing it. I think over the last few days, we've seen somebody caught with almost 0.5 million USD in cash. That at a time when the central bank is trying to, clear some of the excess cash in circulation. That is very, very, very telling. Two things before I hand it over to you. One is the question of technical failures. The reason why a lot of elections, especially across the continent, are using electronic voter, identification and authentication and voting system is because they want to curb vote buying and vote stuffing and all manner of stuff that could lead to poor electoral outcome. However, the deployment of those technologies do not happen in a vacuum. They are not being run by angels. They are run by the same people that you're trying to run away from. So they tend to have trust deficit issues. Secondly, when they are deployed on the day, they tend to have tremendous amount of failure that sometimes is not being factored in terms of the logistics. And finally, is the question of security. Nigeria, during the tenure of the current outgoing president, security has been a massive problem.
So obviously the challenges in just voting reflects perhaps the challenges, that the country is facing. And in a country of more than 220 million people, more than 93 million people have registered for permanent voting cards. That's the most ever. What kind of change do Kenyans want to see?
I think many, many voters want to come out and see two changes primarily. One is economy. Nigeria is one of the largest oil producers on the continent, but that is not reflected on the quality of life for Nigerians. You're looking at unemployment numbers that is above 30%, if the data is correct. You're looking at an inflation rate of over 20%. Those two things just indicate an economy that is not working for majority of the people. And if the number of people who are registered are anything to go by, that is a really, really serious problem in terms of the generation. The SARS, campaign that was launched, that took place in 2020, where young Nigerians were really fed up by insecurity, particularly a police unit that was carrying out violence. That was a turning point for why a lot of the youth of 93.5 million people registered, almost 50% of them are young people between the age of 18 and 35. They were more or less energized by this. And secondly, the university being closed for 16 months because of lecturer strike, that also added fuel. That's number one. economy for the young people. Number two is insecurity across the country.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Really appreciate your time. Abdullahi Boru Halakhe, the Africa and Security Policy Analyst.
My pleasure.